good morning to our session, Context is King. I'm doing that together with Jens, and yeah, really happy to do this, and thank you for joining that. And let's get the ball rolling now.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, good morning from my side as well. I think a good location in the bar, so we stopped, I think, quite similar location yesterday and start now here in the bar again. Yeah, thanks for joining. My name is Jens. I'm one of the founders of DeviceTrust. Sasha is also one of the founders. We have our topic is Context is King, and we put a question mark behind it to probably get a kind of conversation, discussion about that topic. But yeah, what we mean by that is when we started in 16 with our stuff, contextualizing IT, it was more conversations with customers, partners about why context, what is context, why we need context, and all these kind of things and topics. And over the last couple of months, 18 months I would say, the conversation gets more in the direction that everybody says, yeah, we need some kind of context. Context is king. It's important to consider context. So we see a lot of traction on that area about context and how to use the context when you're providing applications, data, apps, and all this stuff to users and employees. So that as a short introduction. And the main reason why everybody's talking about this context stuff is just a simple point is the role of the user is not enough anymore to decide what is allowed, what kind of apps, what kind of data is the user allowed to access. We need much more information to consider what is allowed, what is not allowed. And that's exactly what when we talk about contextualizing IT, when we talk about context. So let's look a bit deeper into it. When we see, or when we're talking to our customers, it's mainly about these three areas. We're talking about security on one hand side, compliance, regulatory requirements, all these kind of questions coming up from customers. And we see two main areas. One clearly is contextual security, where it's about, is the device secure the user is using? Is the location secure the user is connecting from? Is the network secure the user is using to access the virtual environment, to access my data, to access my applications? On the other hand side, it's about contextual user experience, which means does the user have access to all resources, to all data, depending on the context he's accessing from. These two main areas we see. And to get this into the virtual environment, to be able to consider this context, or what kind of context we need for that, is how we categorize that in five main categories. It's information about the hardware the user is using to decide is it a secure device or is it a device he's allowed to access from. It's information about software, especially on Windows devices, about security components on this device. Does the device have all security components I require that the user is allowed to access? It's about network information, so what kind of network the user is using, what kind of locations the user is accessing from, and last but not least, what kind of information or what kind of privileges, for instance, the user has on his device he's working with and he's accessing our virtual environment from. And that's exactly what we're doing, and Sasha will go into more technical details in a minute and show what we mean by that and talking about use cases. But what we mean by that is that we add this detailed context as DeviceTrust. We add this detailed context in addition to the role of the user. We provide this detailed context information into the existing management framework, so you can use your existing policy management tools to use our context, to use the context to decide what is allowed, what's not allowed. And we also add what we call action and triggers, that you are able to act on context changes, that you are able to apply policies when a specific context is at the endpoint. Just on a side note, and I think we have the slide at the end again, we provide, every community member is able to get access to a 12-month NFR license. So if you want to play around with it, if you want to test it, you can apply on devicetrust.com/community. And then you get an NFR license, you get everything, documentations and stuff like this. And also, if you want to get support from our side, we are happy to support you with the implementation, building up use cases, and so on. So Sasha, I think over to you.
Yeah,
to the
perfect,
more important part.
Good. Well, what we have done is we prepared a couple of videos to show you what DeviceTrust is doing. So I want to start with one video, and I will stop sometimes or pause and go into the details. So what we're doing is, you see this now with Citrix, but we're also supporting Microsoft RDP, we're supporting Amazon Workspaces, and we will soon support VMware Plastic Stream as well. So we don't care how the session gets established. If you're inside the corporate network, if you're outside the corporate network, if you're using NetScaler, if you're using RAS, if you're using a VPN, we don't care what you're using. We are fully transparent to this. I will explain later how the technology is working, but let's go into how it works. So what you see here is a normal storefront logon. In this instance, the user is signing in. I'm showing you now a published desktop, and the context is already, and that's important, at that point the user logs on or the user reconnects. The context is already available within the virtual session. You can already use this context to apply policies on that. So this has happened during the logon. And what's important for us is, because our background, this is just a little bit to explain, our background from DeviceTrust, we are all coming from AppSense. So we are all ex-AppSense guys. And what we learned in all these customer projects is exactly what Jens is saying, is the role is not good enough anymore. And what we also learned, there's a lot of customers that love to do logon scripts. There's a lot of customers who wants to use REST, wants to use Ivanti, AppSense, they want to use WEM, whatever. So for us it's important that we make this context easy consumable. That's very important. So we provide this context in 3 different methods. The first method is what we can see here. I'm not going into these details quite a lot, but what you see here on the left-hand side, in the registry at the moment, everything starts with device represents my endpoint. This is all information about my endpoint. As you can see, there's different things. This is the most important one, is the Action Center. You know what the Action Center is, I don't need to explain that. So information about the security state of the device, for example. So we provide that. I'm just going a bit forward. We have information such as network information. Let's go into that one a little bit. As you can see here, is all kind of network information, and this is all information from the endpoint. So this represents one network. In this instance, is a Wi-Fi network. You can see exactly it's a secure Wi-Fi, is this a corporate Wi-Fi, etc. So this is all information which are available in this instance within the registry of the user session, where you can see all the information about the endpoint itself. So let me go into that one. Like Windows update is a big important point. If some update is missing, you don't get any access. This information we make available, number one, in the registry, as you have seen here. We also make this information available as environment variables. So let me just go through. Just as a side note, you see here, let me zoom in. You see here also information starting with host. These are representing the Citrix server currently connected in, like bandwidth, latency of my session. If this is changing, we can react on that. And here you see the default information you have with all other management solutions. It's just the IP address of the endpoint and the net BIOS name. And we provide more information, and we make it available as a registry. I'm just jumping a little bit forward. We make them also available as environment variables, and we also make them available through a command line interface. You can be really specific for what kind of context you're looking for. This is what you can see here. So, but we go further like this. So in this instance, what you see, I connected to a Citrix server, and from the Citrix server, I'm connecting to another published application. This instance, I'm used Microsoft RDP, but in real life scenarios is sometimes you're connecting to a Citrix box, and then you have different silos providing different applications, and we pass the whole context into any double hop or multi-hops. So if I go into the second session, I find the same information as we have seen in the first session. So we can react on that. But we additionally to that, so let me pause it here. We provide information about the first hop. So you can see here exactly from what server I'm coming from. This is the first hop, and this instance is the first hop. So we also provide multiple hops. So I could also jump from the RDP session into another session. So this is what we're doing as a base technology. So as you can see here, this is a multi-hop information. So I'm just jumping a little bit. But what we also do, and this is also very important, we make this context always up to date. It's during logon, it's during reconnect, and we make it up to date during session runtime. And I want to demonstrate that to you. You see here, I think you can see that quite good. The Action Center firewall is good, and you see here the client information. If I go now and change the firewall, which I want to show you here, you see immediately, sorry, you also see in a double hop, It's also the same state. Now what I'm doing is I'm changing the firewall dynamically, and we don't care what the reason is why the firewall is no longer good enough, but we can update that immediately within the virtual session. So any context change on the endpoint can be used immediately to update the information into the virtual session. But we can even do more with that. It's not just, this is an important point here, sorry, just to show that here as well. So what you have seen before was what we call the context properties. The context properties are normally used within customer scenarios to define a context the customer is looking for. So for example, we have the security state, which is in this instance protected. For some customers, if you ask what is the security state in your mind, they would say it's a firewall, it's antivirus. Some other customer would say, is this plus a certificate plus other information? But this is normally what the customer is using to react and work on this. For example, this is endpoint Visio license, for example, is a very topic point we have. And you can see here, how is the user accessing the environment? Is it the internal, is it the external? What's the corporate office they're coming from? This is all real life scenarios from customers we have. So, and let's go back to the video. Here we go. Let's go just forward. But as I said, we can do more. It's also the same context available in the double hop. But what we can do is we can react on context change. You see here this folder, DeviceTrust Action. This is not the same profile, it's two different profiles. This should just demonstrate if I change the firewall, you can see something happened here within the virtual session. So we are also able to identify context changes, but we are also able to react on context changes. Whatever that is can be defined. It's up to you. It could be anything. It could be triggering Citrix WEM, which we will see later on in the video. It could be anything. In this instance, I show you App Locker. So I think you guys are aware what App Locker is. I don't need to explain that. And you know App Locker can be configured by user group memberships during logon, for example. We can do this fully dynamic during the session runtime as well. So we can also work on a reconnect, which is important. And what you see here in this instance, we reconfigure App Locker based on the security state. And as I said, this is not real use case. I'll show you more in the next videos of really use cases from the customers. But in this instance, just to show you the possibility, we have identified that the security state is not good anymore. We can display a message box to do a soft close. You can define whatever you want in this message box, also the timeout. We could also hardly kill the application. And in this instance, you see we have reconfigured App Locker, and you cannot start the business application anymore because the security state is not good enough. This is just an example how we use context to drive the policy within the virtual session. In this instance, I can run the business application again because the security state is good. This should just show the basics of device trust. So we are able to provide context from the endpoint into the virtual session. We make them always up to date, and we can use this context to work with policies. One thing is, as Jens was saying, we are working together with Citrix, for example, with WEM. We provide this information in WEM. WEM is using that for the policy. This is one thing. We use App Locker. We use FSLogix, for example, for application masking. We can do this with Absence Application Manager or Ivanti Application Controller is a new name. We don't care, but we can provide that in all these different environments. I want to show you now a real life scenario, and this is now again is conditional access. Conditional access for us means we can control access to the virtual environment depending on the context. In this instance, I show you again the security example on a published desktop as well as on published applications, because this is also very impressive. I show you then in the next video how we can do this, for example, based on the Wi-Fi network you connected. And this is something I want to show you now. So in this instance again, the security state does not meet, of the endpoint does not meet our requirements anymore. I'm signing into our published desktop, and because we knew the context here of the endpoint, we can control access here to the virtual session. As you can see here, no access anymore. And the message box you see here, this can be really defined up to you. If you want to give a hint why it's impossible, then it's up to you. If the state comes back, we release a session and you can work. And this even works during session runtime. So if I have a critical application open, the context is changing on the endpoint, we can even control access to the virtual environment at that point if the context changes. And this is, as I said at the moment, is just the security state. This even works with published applications. So this is what we see in the next example. So I'm signing in with a good security, with a bad security state again. I'm starting a published application. This is just Notepad, could be any application. And we can even do this conditional access on published applications as well, based on context. And what you see here now is the application will be not displayed, but the message box will be displayed, and no way to into the session. If the state comes back and you have multiple applications opened, for example, open another application like WordPad, and then something happened on the endpoint, we can even control access on that point. So if you see here, just changing, and then we remove all the published applications. And again, we don't care how the session gets established. René?
Can you hide applications based on the condition in storefront?
Not yet,
Okay.
but we're working on that. We will expand that later on what the goal is for us going forward into the future. But you're right, it's also a thing we get quite often asked, could we use the context we provide in NetScaler in storefront or in other technologies? And you're absolutely right, we will be able to do this. This is also one of the, but this is just conditional access based on the security state. We can even do this Wi-Fi based, and I'm showing you here now IGIL. And the reason why I'm showing you IGIL is because we're working with IGIL together. IGIL has already integrated our piece of software. I will explain to you in a couple of seconds how the architecture works, because it's very light and very simple. So in this instance, you see on the IGIL, I'm connecting to a secure Wi-Fi, and if I start my session, I get access because the Wi-Fi I'm using is secure. This is a real life scenario use case out in the field. We have quite a lot of customers that don't want, if the user is using an open Wi-Fi network, that he cannot access the session or specific applications. Here you can see we use the information Wi-Fi secured, true or false. And if I disconnect the session, this even works on reconnects, and I'm going again, changing the network now to a public open network. And I think you guys as Germany, Telekom is quite popular in Germany. This is what I'm connecting to now. And this network is now not encrypted anymore. So it could be Starbucks, it could be McDonald's, wherever I sit at the moment. You see, no encryption. And if I try to start again the session, no access anymore, or even on a reconnect. This is our technology. I will explain how it works when we talk about the architecture. You have no access anymore. And again, you can define what you write here. It could be in all kind of languages. This is conditional access just based on the Wi-Fi network. It's a real life scenario we have with customers. So the next one, maybe I'll just explain the architecture before I go into other videos. So the architecture is very simple and very important. You don't need any additional infrastructure. No web server, no management server, we don't need anything. Only thing we need is, this is your Citrix server you're connected to. When I say always Citrix, I mean it's also native Microsoft and Amazon in this instance. On that side, you need to install the DeviceTrust host. It's just the MSI package which needs to be installed. We are completely defined by group policies. So everything DeviceTrust should do or shouldn't do, you can define in group policies with normal group policy management. Everything we do, we write down into the event log, because our customers, when we started, they told us, please don't create your own reporting solution because we have already something in place. Can you just plug in? And this is what we're doing with the event log. On the client side, we need a piece of software, but that's now very important. This piece of software needs to be installed, but not managed. That's very important. It's just a piece of software which needs to be installed. On IGIL, we're already part of the latest IGIL OS. For Windows, we have a separate client available, and as I said, this just needs to be installed. The logic is following. If the ICA session or RDP or PC over IP session gets started, we don't care what is between gateway, LAN, I don't know.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
The client, you have client for Linux and Mac?
We have client for, at the moment, for Windows, for iOS, for Linux, for Ubuntu, for IGIL, and coming soon Mac, and coming soon Android.
All right.
And Google OS for America, which is quite popular. At that point, the ICA session starts, the client starts to talk to the host. The host tells the client, hey, I have a config for you. I only want the following information from you. Then config gets exchanged to the client generates that information immediately, in runtime, and send it back to the host. So this is the logic, and therefore we don't need to apply any kind of configuration to the endpoint. René?
Does it work over HTML5 connections?
Not yet.
Okay.
We're using the virtual channels. That's a very good point. So what we're doing here is we're using the virtual channels, and we have applied, or we have currently got 2 patents for it. One is we're using virtual channels, and the second one is we're going through a gateway service. Because, for example, on iOS, there's no virtual channels available. So therefore, we need a different way. HTML5 is at the moment not supported, but it's also coming, as you asked before, with a new platform, not with the next edition of our platform, because then we're also able to work with HTML5, remoting clients and apps. That's the idea. Any more questions? Yeah, Frank?
If you have no DeviceTrust client on your client installed, is then any connection dropped or declined?
You can define that. The default behavior is if there's no DeviceTrust client, we leave them still in, because we know on the host that there's no DeviceTrust client installed. Or you can say if someone comes without a DeviceTrust client, he get no access. This is also possible. And it also can be defined by group memberships.
The Windows client, do you need admin access to install it?
For the first installation, yes, and the reason why we need admin rights is 2 reasons for that. Number one is Citrix only works as a receiver with virtual channels, only works in admin mode. So that's a limitation we have a little bit. And on the other side, because we install in admin mode the first time, it's more secure as in user mode, because in user mode there's more possibility to manipulate data at all, and therefore we decided to do it in admin mode. But the good news is, and this is something I show you in the next video, this is just a one-time installer. If the client is installed one time, we can auto-update this from within the virtual session. This is something I want to show you now. With iGel it's different. No? It's clear with iGel we need a new iGel OS. With iOS we need a new iOS app from the App Store. But this is also one of our new features in the current release, is auto-update. So auto-update, so let me pause this. You see here, this currently installed DeviceTrust client 80.1.110, and what the user is doing now a normal session to a Citrix platform, in this instance, so come on. And you will see within the Citrix session a notification that the client gets updated. So I'm doing that, you could even do this with a published application, there's no difference. By the way, 1 second, just explain that. Here. Here, that's our technology. This connecting to. This is exactly when the client talks to the host, exchanging the config, the client gets this information and send it up. That's exactly what's happening at that time. In this instance now, the user gets we control access to the desktop, we are updating your software, please wait. The installation was so quick, you haven't seen the message box, but you see here now your update has been installed, and that's all. User needs to re-sign in, because we need to load a new DLL for the session, and then the new client of DeviceTrust is installed, so we will see it in the, so if I'm signing in now, it works, I get access because I have the latest client. Per definition, I can define from the admin side what kind of client I want. And if I look to the client, you see fully transparently, we have upgraded the client to the latest build. So this is also important. It's always a one-time installation. If the DeviceTrust client is installed, we can update this centrally without any question. Andy?
Are you aware of users maybe taking screenshots or something? Is that something you can recognize?
I will let me answer that a little bit later when we talk a bit about roadmap, but this is definitely something we're looking for. This is just with published application, but it's the same kind of stuff. So as you've seen, the auto update also works out of the box. And that's very important for our customers and partners, because they don't want to manage endpoints. And that's the point. So this just needs to be installed, and that's it. That's the architecture.
And when we update the receiver, what's the procedure then?
It's no problem for us, because we're using the normal Citrix way how we plug in our virtual channel into a receiver. So if the receiver is upgraded, that's fine for us. It's no problem.
Right, so the DeviceTrust client basically stays there.
Yeah, absolutely. We are independent. Though maybe that's the point. So we are independent of the Citrix receiver, but we're using the Citrix defined way how we load the DLL.
Is the client unique to each customer, or is this
No,
inside?
no, it's also a good point. Our customers told us that the first customers we had was customers provide access to external people which not belong to their company. And one of the requirements was if this guy works this day for that customer, the next day for another customer, maybe they use both DeviceTrust, can we cope with that? Yes. The design of the DeviceTrust client is like this, where every session can have separate information. So in other words, if I'm connecting from that laptop to company Jens Schmidt, and in company Jens Schmidt, the admin says I want 10 information of the endpoint, and another customer says I want 100, we can work with that at the same time. Any more questions?
The client version is important as well. So if you have the new one at client 1 and the older client 2,
it works always backwards compatible. It's always backwards compatible. The only thing is when you connect a newer client to an older host, let's say this could be also possible, then maybe the new client have the information about if the endpoint is mirrored or not, but the host don't understand this information, so they don't provide this information. No? But it works in both ways. Absolutely correct. Any more questions? Good. So that's the architecture. Very simple, but again, no infrastructure, and you can configure everything with group policies. I'll show you later what we're doing and how this works. So I just need to look at the watch a little bit. Okay, that's perfect. So I want to show you now some real life scenarios. So for example, secure screensaver. This is something we would never imagine that this is really required for customers. But we had a customer in the US came back to us and said the following scenario. Our problem is, and this is user experience, but also security, is our problem is we have laptops. The laptops have always a local screensaver, a secure screensaver. When they use Citrix, they connect to a Citrix platform, which also have a secure screensaver. And if you have a published application, there's another screensaver. So if the screensaver is activated, the user needs to plug in multiple times his passwords because you cannot link that together. So what we do is we use the information of the endpoint about the screensaver to dynamically define a policy within the Citrix world to enable or disable the screensaver. And this is what you see now. So in this instance, I'm on my local Windows 10 endpoint, just going to the screensaver settings to demonstrate it to you, because we can do this also real time. So you can see here, I have a screensaver. We go zoom in a little bit. And for that customer, it was important that the screensaver is a built-in screensaver. This is below equal 50 minutes, and on resume you need to have your password. That was for the customer the requirement. If I'm signing in into my Citrix world, you will see that we use this information within the virtual world to define the secure screensaver in Citrix, or not, depends on the endpoint. So in this instance, we go into the registry. Come on, we go into the registry. And we're jumping down to this information, and the information we're looking for is screensaver. So I will zoom in a little bit. You see exactly the same information, and this information is used to define a context the customer is looking for, and the context was secure screensaver, true or false. If it's true, I don't need a screensaver in Citrix. If it's false, I need to enable the screensaver. So in this instance, because it's true, you see there's no screensaver enabled at all. So what we're doing now is, just to demonstrate it to you how it works, I go now to the endpoint and just change it a little bit. So I just disable this button, and you see immediately affects the Citrix world. So you see it's no longer, it's no longer true, it's now false. And in the background, we activate now the group policy for the screensaver. In this instance, it's just 5 seconds, doesn't mean this is real life. And if I go out and wait 5 seconds, you see the screensaver gets enabled. And this is real life scenario, so we can control the screensaver in the virtual world based on the context of the endpoint. And it could be any kind of group policy. This is just one example. As you can see here, it's now back to true, and therefore we have disabled the screensaver again. This is just, I would say, it's security combined with user experience. Well, this is also a quite interesting use case, and the next one is also something we got from the community. So in this instance, we got it from the IGIL community. There's one of the requirements from the IGIL side as well as from customers in the Windows side was, can we make actions if the lid is closed on the notebook? So if I close the lid on my endpoint, can I react in the virtual session? And yes, we can do this. So if we go into that, I'm just demonstrating that to you. We have information about the lid state. and you will see now a little video here upstairs. So you see the lid of my laptop. So what I need to explain here is very important. To record this video, I need to plug in an external monitor to show you what's happening when I close the lid. No? But the real life scenario for the customer was if the lid is get closed and then normally the session stays active. So the Citrix session is still active and the user could still use it. So for example, if I close my lid, go away as a user, some other user could go in and can open the lid and you can still work. And this is something the customer has issues with. In this instance, what you see now, I close the lid and we can immediately respond in the virtual session. And in this instance, we say nothing happened. In 60 seconds, we disconnect the session. So in other words, if I would, within the 60 seconds, go to and open the lid again, the session was immediately opened again because we use this information as context. Go back. And another one I want to demonstrate to you is WEM from Citrix. So how is our context used in Citrix WEM? In this instance, the use case was about, maybe stop here. The use case was contextual application access based on the access mode. You see here, I'm using storefront, no NetScaler, nothing. So I use the internal access. And what we're doing, we provide now the context in real time to the virtual session, and then Citrix WM gets started in using our context. So you see, WM is starting, and then behind the scenes is used our context, and the context they used is, let me zoom in, is this one. Access mode, internal, external, that's what it used. And because it's internal, in our use case, it's all secure, the user get access to specific application. This instance, again, we use always business application, Notepad++. That's the reason I can access this. It could be any application. The look and feel is done by Citrix, and what we do, we control now with AppLogger the access. You see, I sign out now again. I'm using now NetScaler, just to demonstrate it. And this is for us an external access. So we have, and Citrix WM is using this context and reapply different policy sets. So you will see WM is running. You see the application gets removed also from the start menu because access mode is now external. So this is also up to you how you define that. It could be in any kind of language, in any kind of discussion. But I'm a smart user, I know where the application lives, so I go into Notepad and try to start it. It's impossible because we can reconfigure AppLogger at the same point. No? So, but what's happened, and this is most times customers asking us, what has happened when I'm signed in from a secure location, disconnect and reconnect from another location? This is something we show here. So we can also act on a reconnect together with Citrix. So in this instance, again, the same story. I have a bit quicker this video now because we already seen that. So I'm open now this application because I'm internal again. Yeah, come on. So start the application and do a disconnect and come back from the NetScaler side or any other remote solution. We can work with everything. And you will see that we can also react on a reconnect together with Citrix. And this is just an example. It could be FS Logics, app masking. We have done that also quite often together. So we'll see now, again, that we can close down the application. Again, this message is up to you what you want to define and what you want to write down, what kind of language, and everything is removed, and Citrix was using this context again to redefine the environment. This is just real-time scenarios. We have much, much more. You can look at our website. So last one, it's, how is it? Yeah, here we go. It's also again an agile one. We have done this with customers, so it's up to the network the agile is connected to make a decision if you get access or not. In this instance, this was our secure network. So let's go back to that. This was by our definition a secure network. But what's very important, the IP address itself is not secure because I could recreate my own environment at home with the same IP address. So what we're using additional to that is a MAC address of the gateway to find out is this really my environment. And in this instance, because this is a secure, per our definition, it's a secure network, I get access. If I do the same now and just go a bit forward, disconnecting, change the network is not secure anymore, or by our definition, a network you are not allowed to log on. and if I'm doing the same kind of stuff, you see I get access denied because the network I'm using is not allowed to access this environment. This is something, and last but not least, it's just a little bit of a view what we can do. We can do the same with Workspaces, with Amazon, so we're just supporting that on the latest build. Workspaces is also a way how you provide VDIs to your users, and this is currently based on PC over IP from Teradigi native, and we work exactly the same way. We can have the same feature set, there's no difference. So just to demonstrate it to you, this works also with this side. So what's next? So maybe I've forgotten to add these slides to my presentation, but I have done that this week again as well. So let me open the presentation. So okay, let's go first of that one. So this is what DeviceTrust is doing. So it's a kind of overview what we can do to user context. This is a kind of use case overview. So we can do a lot of different things, and it's really endless because with the context in the virtual world, you can really do things you never have to, ever be able to do before. But this is just an extract of what we do. Most things we do is around that one. Conditional access based on context. Also this other stuff here, device-based or licensing at all, is also a very important point. This is a nice use case as well. In a hospital, we had a customer, it was also America, I think, if I remember the first one. He said, you know, the doctors have all mobile devices. And when they sign in the first time, we know, it's in this IP range, we define this default printer. But in this hospital, the doctor could use his device to roam through the building, because Wi-Fi roaming enabled that. Now I can walk. But the problem was always the default printer was the one where I started with. But the doctors or the nurses, what they want is wherever they are in the building, they will just want to print on the default printer, and it should be the printer near them. What we can do is we use the Wi-Fi access points in the building, and based on the Wi-Fi access points, we can find out where you are in the building, and then we know, okay, if you're in that access point, that's your nearest printer. If you're on another access point, it's a different printer, and this will be set fully dynamically, so the doctor does not care about it, it's just printing it. And that's very important and very interesting. Improve usability. We see also Screensaver. We had also already another use case, which is quite funny. It's from a German customer. He said, our Citrix farm is based in Hamburg. But we have people around the globe, around Germany, but the problem, they're all using Google Maps. They're all using Google Search. But what's happened when I'm connecting, for example, from Switzerland to this German platform, what I see when I open Google Maps, always the location of the server, always the search provider of the server, which is not really user-friendly. So what we can do is, we can see where the user is coming from, and we can change the Google search and the Google Maps within the virtual world depending on your context you're coming from. So in other words, if I open in this server with this customer now, if I'm open from, I don't know, wherever they are coming from London, South Africa, wherever, you see immediately when you go to Google Maps, you see your current location is a location you start to look at in Google Maps, or to control to any calculation of streets. The same goes for the search provider. If I use this, I have immediately my search provider. This is also an interesting thing. But that's just an extract of different use cases we have. Go to our website, there's more use case videos. This is what's next for us. So what we want to do is, we started in VDI, and we started to do this on the VDI side. The question from you, René, was always, can you use this in storefront? Not now. Can you use it in HTML5? Not now. But with this platform, what we're doing, we want to provide a context platform which knows the context of all your devices. And this context can be used not only in VDI, it could be used in Netscaler, it could be used in storefront, it could be used in any other solution you think about. It's also IGEL is asking for that. And now back to your question, Andy, and then I'm nearly in time, is what's next? So let's go into that. So it's just an overview what's next is. On IGEL, we implement also the lit state, and this is maybe for you interesting as well, is, you know, for you guys doing IGEL, the UMS is a management server managing the endpoint, and we got requirements from customers to say, could we check if this IGEL endpoint is managed by my UMS, then I can act on that. With this we can enable. That's the first indication of what you're asking, Andy. We can even check if the endpoint, the IGEL endpoint, is remote controlled with VNC. And if it's remote controlled, it's for some customers a real security concern, because someone is remote controlling my endpoint, which is used to connect to my environment. We will release the first Apple client from us. We will improve the Apple iOS information. We will improve the Windows OS. This is what you asked, Rob, about what's with the new security stuff from Microsoft. And also what we will add is this endpoint screen is remote controlled or not. And this is exactly what you asked for. So what we want to be able to do is, for example, if you use WebEx, it's all fine. If you are just an attendee to a WebEx session, it's fine. No? But at the point I'm starting to be a presenter in the WebEx session, you maybe want to control access to certain applications or to the desktop, because that's the way data can leave your company. Because I've seen that on my own as well in my old days. So the easiest one would be Jens would say, Sasha, I can provide you with information, I set up a GoToMeeting session, I give you control, you can see my screen, and you can do, in my context, you can go and search for data in malware stuff. And with this information, we know, oh, the endpoint is remote controlled. We can even control the whole session or just allow only certain applications. This is what's coming next. DeviceTrust host, we're supporting who is VMware Plastic Stream. And we also want to be able to hide applications which aren't allowed anymore. So if you've seen with the published applications, that we can hide published applications, we won't do the same. If you do a reconnect, instead of closing down the application, we want to remove the application completely out of the view of the user. So the application will be still running in a secure space, but you as a user will not see it anymore. And the next one is, and that's the last one, then I'm done, is at the moment, the magic is all done, as I said, with GPO. Within GPO, you can define your your DeviceTrust runtime behavior, what kind of information you're looking for. All the policies to say when you control access is done with PowerShell at the moment. So this, again, is very simple, but what we want to do is, we want to integrate a user interface based on the group policy that you can define everything you're looking for. This should be looking like this, that you have the ability to create your configs. We don't need scripting anymore, but we will still provide scripting capabilities, because we have customers that like to script everything, but we have also other customers that don't like to script, they want to do everything in UI. But everything is possible, and I think we are nearly on time, perfect, yeah. I would say. And any questions, guys? Any questions? Frank?
Is there any plan for the future to have installation in the user context instead of admin?
We had that before, but the challenge was with when you just use RDP, it's possible. We can do this also in the user context because RDP works different. With Citrix, we need to go into admin mode because the receiver is running in admin mode, and we cannot inject our DLL in the right way. Therefore, we need to have an admin installation. This might be changed when we talk about the platform, because then we try to be independent from virtual channels at all, and therefore this could be a future stuff. Definitely. Any more questions?
What's the licensing?
Jens, that's perfectly your question.
So we have in general, it's a named user licensing model. So we don't care how many devices a user is using. So you can install the client on as many devices as you want, and we count the named user. And from a model point of view, it's a subscription-based model. So we don't have perpetual licenses and then add maintenance to it. It's a subscription-based license model.
No concurrent model.
Let's say officially,
in general,
it's not possible to do named user licensing with the.
No, clearly we named user is the standard licensing model. If we have a use case, if we have a scenario with a customer where a concurrent model fits better in, then we need to talk.
I think the point is, or I think the technical sales, no? So I would say if the customer have just a concurrent user in Citrix, we will adopt that. Simple as that. Yeah. But the official license model is named user. No? Any more questions? Perfect. Then try it out. If you want to know, if you want to contact us or just our contact details, you'll find us on LinkedIn or Xing, any platform. We're looking forward to work with you guys, and thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of the day.